Oh, yeah.
Looking like a rainbow bomb as I'm coming round. Listen for the pop, never makes a sound. Another man down, another man down.
Definitely, if you want the short and long of it, this is a great system, and I think for a person that's looking for a pre-built, Lenovo is shockingly good when it comes to price and the build quality, which I was really surprised about, and not a lot of bloat. So I would say for bloat, it's very low. For build quality, it's very high. For price, it's actually really competitive, and then for performance, it definitely kicks ass in terms of performance. Alright, today we're looking at my new computer, and like all my videos here, I will be mainly looking at the 3 things that are most important when looking at a computer. Because obviously no one here is going to buy this computer from this video or even consider something like this. However, what I really wanted to sort of convey is the fact that pre-builts have really come a long way in sort of their creation, their build, their comfort level in terms of, you know, how comfortable people are buying them. From last time that you might have checked out the kind of scene of pre-built computers. So I really wanted to make this video to kind of explain that and explain where I came from in buying this as my next computer after I had sworn off buying pre-builts after my last computer, HP, kind of locked me into kind of an ecosystem I didn't really want to be in. So ultimately, 3 things I'm going to be talking about are the price, the performance, and the build quality, right? Because if you're looking at pre-built, those are mainly the 3 things that you're looking for. You're going to look for, what is it? Is it price competitive compared to something I could build on my own? Is it performant compared to something I could build on my own? And is it, most importantly, built well? Does it have enough thermals? Is it missing any features or components? Is it locked down in some way from upgradability? Is like the BIOS stuck in some capacity? And so we're really going to be looking at all those. But this is ultimately the computer I end up getting. It is a Lenovo Legion T7 with the newer case design as compared to the older case design, which was this right here. It's the much newer, much more improved design that has a little bit better grill and a little bit better cooling as well as pricing. So it's right here. It's relatively big, as you can see from the intro, and it's definitely pretty heavy because of the construction. It's mostly metal, I believe. Most of it's metal with a glass side panel. And yeah, so obviously the components as well are going to definitely increase that weight to it, right? That feeling of it being heavy. The GPU itself is probably about like 10, 15 pounds, and the entire thing I think weighs about 37, 38 pounds. So yeah, and it doesn't really have like a carrying handle, so it can be kind of hard to grip onto it because there's no sort of surface that you can easily grip onto, because you can kind of grip onto this front panel that's kind of like a hexagonal shape. Like, first impressions are, I really like the case. I like how it's designed. I like how the front panel here definitely gives airflow to these 3 fans in the front. I like how sturdy it feels and how good all the materials on that case itself feel, and how sturdy stuff like the power button feels and the front I/O. And these things are kind of important when your first impressions you get out of the box. How does it feel? And to me, this feels really good. I also like the embossed Legion logo that illuminates, which you can change, but it does illuminate, and so I do like that. It's a little bit, you know, larger than, say, like a small symbol icon type logo, but I do generally like the branding in the corner there, and it's not, you know, all over the case, and it doesn't have, the case itself is not, you know, super flashy. It's pretty, you know, standard box size, which is nice, with not, you know, a bunch of random angles and highlights and stuff that would make it seem like garish. So yeah, overall first impressions, I would say definitely pretty good when it comes to that front. So now, beyond first impressions, let's just really talk about the 3 components that you're here to learn about, which is the price, performance, and the build quality. Let's start on price first. The pricing of this computer, I have the ticket. The price I paid for this is $19.58 It came with a year of ultimate support, and it was free shipping. Now, this does include a $100 coupon from Black Friday and a $100 coupon from a student discount. The Black Friday coupon here would probably be consistent with other sales that you would expect this computer to be on, and the student discount one, clearly you can only get if you or someone you know is a student, but that's saving about $100. But even with that, the specs I have here, and I'll show this, in a second, especially I have here put this in a relative good standing in terms of price. So that's the price, $19.58. If you round it up by $100, you could say it's $20.58, right? And so ultimately, I tried to make a comparable one on PC Part Picker. I am logged in. Cool. So yeah, I can just show it here. I did try to make one comparable on PC Part Picker here, and ultimately it ended up being even more expensive than the one that I got from a pre-built. Now this does have a couple of like adjustments. So for example, a lot of people, when they try and do a comparison between like a PC Part Picker list and a pre-built list, they'll do things like omit Windows 11, because the idea here is you'll just pirate it or get it from somewhere else, or be able to like make a boot from an existing Windows device that you have. So just for the sake of like hearing those people out, right? For this comparison, I put that as $0, and I also put in the price that I was able to get my 4080 for, considering the 4080 Super is now out, and so that kind of makes it not really an apples to apples comparison, because you can't really buy this computer anymore with a 4080 because the Super kind of replaced it and took the price down a little bit. So I just put that at the $1,000 price that the current Supers are going for. And then I also added a additional SSD and RAM. The reason I did this is because it started with pretty low RAM, so in order to get this computer for the price I did, it had a lower amount of storage and 16 gigs RAM to 32, so I just upgraded both of those, so you can see that reflected in the $90 price here and $70 price here. I didn't get rid of the original RAM and storage that was in here, even though I technically replaced the original RAM, because I still ended up paying for that in the 1958 that I paid for. So I was like, okay, for comparison's sake, for keeping it consistent, I kept those in here. So the total all-in cost of the entire computer plus the additions I made, which were the real cost of what I paid for these things, and also including the fact that I didn't pay for Windows in this example, it would still be $21.68 versus I believe 1958 plus 70 plus 90. That's you're just going to be useless. You're going to be useless. Okay, you're going to be literally pointless. Got it. Right, let's just do that. 1958 plus 70 plus 90, it's, $21.18. So I think it was like $39, right? $39? Yeah, it's like $39, $49 bucks. Cheaper to do what I did, which is buy the lesser, technically expensive of the pre-builts that had the 4080 in it, and just upgrade the RAM and storage, then buy the next up model, either through this or through the Lenovo store, right? Because the next up model that had 32 gigs of RAM and like a 1 terabyte SSD was like $2,300, which wouldn't make sense, but buying the model with only 512 gigs base and 16 gigs of RAM allowed me to basically get it for cheaper. So my total all-in price for this was $21.18, and building it yourself would be $21.67. So overall price-wise, I got a really good deal on this. Just so if anyone's confused, specs-wise, I can pull up my actual specs that it shows on the receipt here. So, and these are basically what's in the PC Part Picker list here. It's just more consistent in like the official. So it's officially an i7, Windows 11 Home, custom in quotes 4080, 16 gig 5200. This is Samsung memory, I believe. 512 gig SSD. Kioxia, I believe, made this SSD. I wasn't 100% sure, but I was able to test it, so we'll get to that in a sec. And Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.1, all that stuff, right? So that's the official specs, and that's mostly what's represented here, except adding, again, the things that I bought. So overall price, it's very competitive and even better than what you could technically buy right now if you were to do it yourself. So now that we're set on price, let's talk about performance. So I tested Avatar Frontiers of Pandora with multiple settings and different kind of up samplers and stuff. But what I really wanted to kind of convey with the performance is that I don't really like using graphs. So I much prefer showing you experiences that you can achieve with something like this than trying to show you a graph, because they kind of reduce your ability to understand numbers down to something that's very, mechanical. It's like, oh, I need, this might get 140, but this could get 150. It kind of dilutes that ability to create experiences, which I think are really important when you're getting a PC like this. What can you experience that you couldn't before? And the answer is this game. The reason I chose this screenshot here is because this is showcasing a lot, right? It's showcasing, I think this is in 2K, right? Yeah, I have a max here. 2K max settings on this game, about 95 FPS average. But the more important fact is it looks like this, right? So it looks really nice. I think this is using the TAA upsampler. Now that's important to know. It's not like an upsample as in like a DLSS or a FSR. It's just like the native default sampler that it uses, which looks really good. Some other games, I know like Mortal Kombat and stuff, basically require an upsampler just because of how they're designed. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not rendering natively. It just means that using some kind of upsampling technology to scale, right? So if you turn it off, it looks weird because it doesn't scale right? 1440p might not be as common. If this is made for like the PS5, for example, it might default to 1080p and upscale to 1440 or 4K. It might not have a native 1440, right? So that's basically what the upscaling means when it's not actually upscaling. It's just how it deals with odd resolutions typically. And it looks like this. Looks really nice. This was captured, just a raw screenshot captured here with all this scenery and stuff, and you can zoom in and see it looks really nice. But what I wanted to call attention to is, can I zoom or is it being weird? Yeah, okay. I want to call attention to this. The average FPS right here is about 77 right now, but it averages to around 75 to 90, I would say, depending on the area. What's more important is the fact that the GPU temps are sitting at 61 and the CPU is sitting at 56. And I've only been able to get the GPU up to like 70 and the CPU up to like maybe, if I'm lucky, like a 77, and that's only like spikes. It never stays there. It's usually hovering around the 65 to 70 mark, which is really good for a game like this that's on max settings. That's basically as good as you can get, because this is still using, ray tracing and all that. It's not using path tracing, but it is using a lot of ray tracing technology, more so than most games do at the time, and it's getting these results, which I think are really good results for this. Now, it is using, obviously, 14 gigs of video memory, I believe, right? And because this has 16 gigs of VRAM, it's able to basically use that a lot. And so that's one of the advantages of getting like a 4080, which this has, is the 16 gigs of VRAM. It's able to use all that, so that's what that is. But I would suspect the RAM is also pretty high, so it's this performance only really works if you have 32 gigs of RAM, because if you have 16 gigs, it's going to be handicapped by that whatever threshold you have set up. So hopefully Avatar is recording here. I set it to record screen, so it should, but and this is recording in AV1 if anyone was curious, just in terms of how it's being displayed. So let's go to, typically under video it tells you, there's a thing in the corner that I'll show you in a second that basically shows you your VRAM, and so when it maxes out or gets to a nearby threshold, it will basically, things that utilize that well are going to utilize as much as possible, and stuff that doesn't won't. So there's a big complaint in Starfield when it first came out, because it was using like all the resources of your computer without actually, like, to make some kind of frame rate, and then not actually using them. So it would max out at like half your VRAM and still run like shit, and it was not great. So the VRAM usage right now, as you can see, and it actually shows you a breakdown. So right now we're using 8.9 out of my 14 available gigs, and most of that is being used on VRAM, right? Texture streaming, VRAM, dedicated processor, unavailable, and it's doing that. And if we look at the game, let's see, it looks really nice. We're in a little bit of a laggy area. It's also important to note that I am recording right now, obviously, so we're getting like 65 frames, 58 frames, and you can see the temps up there, right? They're staying the same, so this is not like a canned test or anything. This is running as it usually would, just showing you around the environment a little bit and stuff. Let's go to this tree up here, get a little bit of higher view. And while there is some spikes, these can mostly be attributed to stuff like my recording and nothing that you would probably experience. Alright, so if we look at this area and we look towards like the mountain, we're getting 52, and we look at the sky and we're getting like 122, and then we look over to that mountain, we're getting around 60, 52, 53, 50, 49, 50, 55, but we're staying around 65 degrees, which I think is quite good, relatively, right? This is definitely totally playable. It looks a little weird on my monitor right now because it's 144 hertz monitor, and this is getting like 60, but overall I would say definitely with the level of fidelity we're seeing here, I would definitely say this is 100% playable and reasonable to, be getting these frame rates and stuff, so. You can also see that like the detail in these things is really high, right? All the grass and vegetation, it's not like blurry or weird. And this is basically the worst scenario that you could put this thing through, is something like this, right? A game that's very graphically intense, and it still stays relatively in line in terms of temperatures. All right, so the next thing we need to talk about is the build quality. So overall, I would say the build quality is definitely really good, and I think the best way to really show this is to, when we talk about it, we look mainly for things like cooling. That's not adequate, as we talked about. Cooling's great. We look for things like disconnected screws, any screws loose, anything like that. Fans that aren't attached correctly. We look for inconsistencies in like thermal paste. We look for other problems like the side panel coming off too easily, things being damaged in shipping, that kind of stuff. None of that appears to be the case. The graphics card, as you can see here, is very well secured because it has a bracket, which is nice. The motherboard, which is hard to see, is definitely in there securely with those ties and screws and stuff. The RAM that I upgraded is definitely in there, not coming out. The CPU cooler is well and bolted in. The fans are obviously spinning the correct way. I was trying to show that there is an SSD right here that I installed, and it had like a heatsink option, so that's nice, right? The things that are installed by default are correctly, thermally sound, right? Other things to keep in mind include the back plate, and then some more specific things relating to BIOS that basically there was one issue where XMP wasn't enabled by default, which is a memory thing for your memory to basically overclock it and give it a bunch more performance. That wasn't on or accessible originally by default, but they eventually fixed that with an update. I was able to enable the update and set my XMP to 5600. So now my RAM runs at full speed. So that was basically the only problem with that. Everything else in the BIOS is very workable. And it also allows you to use like a mechanical keyboard. I know some OSs, like my HP one before, didn't, because it just wasn't designed for it. So this is 100% usable with mouse in keyboard, and also like mouse input, right? So a lot of OSs maybe won't let you do that, and you would have to use the arrow keys or something. This definitely use a mouse, which is nice. So yeah, overall, I'd say build quality is definitely really high. There's nothing I would say that was of a concern in the build quality. Everything arrived here in one piece. Oh, one thing I forgot to talk about is upgradability. So as part of build quality, I always look to check for upgradability, because as a OEM system, you worry a lot of the times that you're going to be stuck in a lot of cases. Now, while this does have a OEM power supply motherboard and graphics card, the motherboard is a standard Z790, so you can replace that. If you want proof, we have a bunch of people like this basically saying that you can replace it because it is a standard mini ATX motherboard. So you can just replace it with any other mini ATX motherboard. Same thing with the power supply. You can just replace that with a normal power supply as long as it fits within the kind of power supply, constraints, cabling and all that stuff. That's all good. And the GPU, while it is custom, it does appear to be based on like a gigabyte sort of structure with the 3 fans, meaning that any other graphics card like that would fit. Maybe you have to replace the brace if a couple years down the line it doesn't fit exactly what you're looking for. But other than that, like in terms of being locked out, it's not locked out in any capacity from those things, which is really nice. As I said, I already replaced the SSD and the RAM, so those are easily upgradable. And I would also think the CPU is pretty upgradable. Obviously, that's going to depend on your motherboard a lot of the times, but there's nothing here that would make me believe that they're using like a custom mount or something like that, right? So overall, the last thing I really want to talk about is the software. So 2 parts about the software. The first thing is the fact that I'll leave a link in the description, but there is very good documentation on everything there is to know about this by going to the tech doc supplied by Lenovo for this case here, right? It goes over everything from the overview to models to specifications relating to your specific case, and the specifications talk about like the different configuration options and operating systems and all that stuff, so you can go through that. If you want to here, I'll leave a link to that in the description. It basically just shows all that and all the certifications. And then the documentation page takes you to this wonderful documentation sort of layout, and that basically goes through product home, drivers and software, troubleshooting, how-tos, guides and manuals. And the guides and manuals section, as you can see here, has like user guide, a setup guide, hardware maintenance, compliance info, warranty info. You can also, what's really cool is you can actually get parts for this yourself. So if you want to replace certain parts for it, you can basically, if you're on the system like I am, you can hit the detect my serial number and it will detect it, and then pop up parts right here that you can buy. You can do as built, model, machine type, all that stuff, and you can buy OEM components directly from Lenovo's site right here using it, which is quite nice. So if a screw comes loose or a fan or something like that, you can easily replace it. It does seem to be pretty expensive to do that, but it's definitely an option. I'd much rather have this than something like HP. They basically say, hey, if it's over like 5 years old, they can't support it and don't want to touch it, which is ridiculous, right? This allows you to at least give you an option to buy parts from them, and it has a FAQ page and a tutorial on how to do it and all that stuff, right? So I definitely think this is very welcome, and I was surprised that this was actually a thing. I would expect, you'd have to go through some wholesaler or something in order to do this, but directly on their page, you can buy parts here, which I think is really nice. Again, driver and software, basically everything you need is here, which is really good. There's nothing here that is too obtuse or too technical, right? Everything here is definitely of use. Now, there's a lot of it, but it's all relatively well maintained and sort of understandable, so you're not going to get confused in terms of the technical specs of it. It's pretty, in layman's terms, which is nice. It's not going to give you a giant tech doc and have all the blueprints of everything, and it's quite manageable. Contact, trade-in, more, everything that's pretty self-explanatory. The how-tos are nice because they give you frequent troubleshooting stuff, so that's good. There's a video gallery if you like using video for this stuff, and it talks about things that might not necessarily be related to the computer itself, like the OS and things like networking and Bluetooth, which I think is always helpful to get people to understand that a lot of the time things that might mess up aren't actually the computer's fault, and there might be something like your Wi-Fi router, right? So I think this is definitely very useful, and I'm glad that Lenovo maintains this page, which I think a lot of other retailers that are not like tier ones like this is would definitely not have something like this. So this is really nice. The last thing, Lenovo does have some baked in software. There's 2 main things: the Legion Arena, which is basically just a game manager, and the Vantage software. I'm just going to show you the Vantage software right now. Vantage software is pretty self-explanatory. It is a showcase of all computer components and sort of things like management. HP had one of these. It was called the Omen Command Center, and it sucked. It literally just had your temperatures, and that was it. This is much more in-depth. Right here on the main screen shows you GPU, CPU, SSDs, including ones that are installed by you and installed by the system itself, and all that stuff. On the right here, it has stuff like CPU and GPU overclocking, and some more specific features like prioritizing your network and auto-closing apps when you open up a game. Under System Tools on this main page, stuff like system updates, power management for laptops, media management, eye fatigue, that kind of stuff, a hardware scan, and audio, as well as a system health button and how to control your lighting. These work pretty quickly. You just customize it right, and you're able to basically set static, flicker, or breathing, certain brightnesses for the various types of components. So I could do internal ambient lighting. I could do one for specifically the Legion fan or the back fan, the front fan, the top fan, the logo itself, and the iconic lighting on here. This is new. I don't remember this being here. And you can just turn the entire lighting off. That's not too much of a problem if you want to save energy. So you can basically just click this button to go back. That's all for this page. There is security, that's just Wi-Fi security that you can access here. Support has all the support stuff. If you want to look at that stuff, it's a search. And then you click info here and you have the serial number that you can copy, the product number, the BIOS version, an optimizer, info on your memory, your storage connected, and your processor, warranty information, and software update tools. So I would say it's pretty much better in terms of organization and structure. I wouldn't necessarily use this for a lot of things, but it's definitely nice to have, especially if you're not as familiar with all these components. Having something to easily go to lighting and easily go to system update is definitely very helpful, because a lot of time Windows will mess this up, so it's good to have another option, right? That's basically all there is to the software. Everything else is standard Windows stuff. Standard Windows 11, not too much to talk about there. Definitely, if you want the short and long of it, this is a great system, and I think for a person that's looking for a PBO, Lenovo is shockingly good when it comes to price and the build quality, which I was really surprised about, and not a lot of bloat. If I look up Lenovo under here, there's only really two things, Vantage and Now. Lenovo Now is basically just their support system, like a remote kind of thing, and Vantage is that thing I showed you before, right? So I would say for bloat, it's very low. For build quality, it's very high. For price, it's actually really competitive. And then for performance, it definitely kicks ass in terms of performance. And also the SSD, which I didn't bring up before, is really quick as well. So these are definitely very high numbers. It's not going to be using like a shitty SSD, which I think a lot of the time you might be concerned about. Oh, it's an OEM, they're going to put like a crap SSD in it to save costs. This does not appear. I mean, it's not like a top tier like Samsung one that can do 9,000 or 8,000, but it's definitely on the higher end, right? It's not going to be a crappy one that's going to break soon. So I would definitely overall say that like the components here they chose are quite high quality, which I was impressed by, right? So definitely, if you're in the market for a pre-built or anything like that, check out Lenovo. This is obviously not sponsored, but just, check out more pre-builts. Do your research, obviously. Lenovo one here seems really good. MSI, I heard, has some pretty good ones most of the time, right? And so just explore this area, because not a lot of people do it, and I think more people need to, because there's a lot of good coming in here. All right, so I will see everyone in the next video.